Hello guys, my name is Olani Ishofunwa and you are welcome to this channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to discuss two important concepts in Microsoft Excel, and that is the absolute reference and the relative reference. Understanding what and how to use these two references is a key factor in becoming an Excel maestro. So endeavor to watch this video to the end. And while doing that, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. To understand the concept of relative and absolute reference, it is better to first of all refresh our knowledge on cell reference with respect to their location. What do I mean? In the table above, this comprises of four columns, columns A, B, C, D, and rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We would like to analyze the content of this table with respect to their location. So let's look at it. Example 1. Let's look at John. The location of John is in cell A2, and that means that column A, row 2. The next example is Lopez. Lopez is located in cell B4, and that means that column B, row 4. And the last example is 2004, and this is located in cell D5, meaning column D, row 5. Column D, row 5. So in summary, we've been able to review what we mean by cell reference with respect to their location. But before we continue, we would like to do a small exercise. Kindly indicate the location of Wesley, the location of Jennifer, and the location of April. If you are sure of the answer, kindly put it in the comment section below. So, having understood cell reference with respect to their location, then let's define and demonstrate relative and absolute reference. By default, a cell reference is a relative reference, which means that the reference is relative to the location of the cell. In the example that we did above, referencing John is the same thing as referring to to cell A2. Referencing Lopez is also refers to we are referencing cell B4, and referencing 2004 we are referring to the location of D5. So as we move down the column or across the row, the cell reference changes, and that is the changes in relative to the position, to the location of the cell. So when we check this second table, when we reference fruit is in cell A12. And if we move when we move down the column, we can see that the cell changes. The content of the cell changes. Orange in cell A13, mango cell A14, apple cell A15. Also, if we move across the row, the content of the cell changes as well, because it changes based on the changes with respect to the location of the cell. Color, that is referencing cell B12. City, referencing cell C12. Also, when we move across the row, green, we are referencing cell B14, Lagos referencing cell C14, and cat referencing cell D14. These are examples of cell reference, and that is why we say that by default, a cell reference is a relative reference. However, for absolute reference are reference that doesn't change when copied. That is, they remain constant no matter where they are copied to. Either you move across the row or you move down the column, an absolute reference remains the same. They do not change. And they are always preceded with a $sign. For example, if you are referencing a cell
If I'm referencing the cell fruit, so to change this is, as we explained earlier on, that this is relative reference, but to change it to an absolute reference, then we'll precede it with a dollar sign. And we'll proceed with a dollar sign, then we have changed it from a relative reference to an absolute reference. Also, if we reference another cell, if we reference this cell C15, this is a relative reference. But to change it to absolute reference, we add a dollar sign in front of it. That changes it to an absolute reference. So a shortcut in changing a relative reference to an absolute reference is the use of the F4 key. If you reference cell D15, this is a relative reference. And if I want to change it to absolute reference and I don't want to type the dollar sign, then once I press the F4 button will change our relative reference to an absolute reference. So we have the lion. So now let's look at this example. In this third table, when we want to demonstrate absolute reference, when we reference the first cell fruit, which is A21, this is a relative reference. And to change it to an absolute reference, I press the F4 button. That changes it to absolute reference. Like we said, absolute reference, if we copy it down the column, it remains the same. The same way, if we copy it across the row, it remains the same. And this absolute reference is always used when we want to fix or lock a cell. That is when we use the absolute reference. So either direction that we would like to move, an absolute reference remains constant. It doesn't change, unlike the relative reference. Now let us demonstrate with example. In this table, we have this sales table. I would like to demonstrate both the relative reference and the absolute reference. To calculate the total sales, then we do the sales price multiply by the number of sites. That is reference cell B2 multiplied by cell C2, relative reference. When we move down the column, we have our total sales is calculated because they are using the relative reference concept. But now, if now want to apply a 4% bonus to each of the sales, the 4% bonus to be applied to each of the sales. If you try to use the same methodology of relative reference, that is cell D2 multiply by the bonus, we have the base bonus amount for the first cell. But when we move down the column, we realize that we do not have any amount calculated simply because when we check the formula, it calculated the total sales with an empty, which is cell E3, but our bonus is only in cell E2. That is why we have 0 in the rest. If you check the rest, it references cell D7 and cell E7, which is why we have our 0. But in order to change this relative reference to an absolute reference, then like we said, when we put our cursor on E2, we want to lock cell E2, which is the bonus, so that it can be applied to all the rows. To lock cell E2, I'll press the F4 button. Pressing the F4 button, as you can see in the formula, I have locked cell E2 by pressing the F4 button. So when I copy this formula down the column, I can see that my bonus amount is calculated. So this is how to use the relative reference and the absolute reference. And this concept is very important, especially when we are dealing with different functions in Excel. And we are going to see more of this in our next class. I believe we understand the difference between these two concepts.
I am glad that you watched this video to the end, and I believe you learned something from it. If so, let me know in the comment section. By the way, have you subscribed to this channel? Have you liked this video? If you have not done so, please do it now. Do it now. And if there's any function in Excel that you are struggling with, don't hesitate to let me know, and we're going to look at it together. Thank you once again, and see you in the next class. Bye.